Hi everyone, it's George here from Anchor Creative Education. Today we're looking at subordinate clause. Now, subordinate clause is a thing that people are quite scared of because it sounds posh, it sounds hard. I will do some translation for you now. Now, you might know this already. The word subordinate means less important, not as important as something else. So Batman and Robin, who is subordinate? Robin is subordinate because he's less important than Batman, is what I imagine. So subordinate means less important. Clause, what does clause mean? Clause means a type of sentence. So subordinate clause means a less important type of sentence. Ta-da! Now, there are two types of clause. We have a song and it goes, there are two types of clause, main and subordinate. You might know that song, you might not yet. Two types of clause. A main clause makes sense completely on its own, and a subordinate clause won't make sense on its own because it will begin with a special thing. It will probably begin with a subordinating conjunction. So I'm going to say some sentences now. You think in your head if it makes sense completely on its own or it's not quite finished yet. Ready? Tom kicked the ball. Main clause made sense on its own. If Tom goes to the party. Subordinate clause didn't make sense on its own. It wasn't finished. If Tom goes to the party, what? We will all be happy, full stop. Oh, thank you very much indeed. Next one. Because it is raining. Because it is raining is a subordinate clause. It doesn't make sense on its own. It's not a finished sentence. I could take the word because away, throw that in the bin, boof. It is raining. It is raining is a full sentence, makes sense completely on its own. That word because subordinated that sentence. I'll come on to that in a second. Next one. The king is very happy. Main clause made sense on its own. Thank you very much indeed. Although she is angry. Although she is angry is a subordinate clause. Very good, my friend. So we've learnt that subordinate means less important. But what about subordinating? That's what we're going to talk about now. Subordinating conjunctions. Conjunction. A conjunction is a linking word. But subordinating, a second ago it was called subordinate and now it's called subordinating. Why, George? Tell me, I will! Subordinating means an action, a verb, a doing word, because the conjunction is subordinating the main clause. What does it mean to subordinate something? To make it less important. If you had a pizza and I came and took all the pepperoni off, I've made it less important, I've made it less good. I've subordinated it. If you're playing football and I pick up the ball and pop it with scissors, you can't play football anymore. I've subordinated it. I've made it slightly less important. Now, if you have a sentence and we attach a conjunction to the beginning, like the king is angry, if the king is angry, that word if subordinated that main clause. It's not a main clause anymore, it's a subordinate clause. And a subordinate clause needs a main clause to go with it. All that means is the extra bit needs a main bit to make sense. So, what are the subordinating conjunctions? I hear you ask. I will tell you now. Thank you. A subordinating conjunction is one of these special linking words, and they join a main clause with a subordinate clause, and it attaches itself to the subordinate clause. So the way we remember them, we remember that there are 15. There probably are a few more, but we remember that there are 15. And we remember after, although, as, because, before, due to, once, since, unless, though. After, although, as, because, before. Next bit goes. Due to, once, since, unless, though. Due to, once, since, unless, though. After, although, as, because, before. Due to, once, since, unless, though. Brilliant. We do that twice. And then it goes. Until, when, if, while, whether. Until, when, if, while, whether. Until, when, if, while, whether. Until, when. So we remember that there are 15 subordinating conjunctions that do that job of attaching extra information to a main clause. They attach a subordinate clause to a main clause. I wonder if you've remembered any of them. After, although, as, because, before, due to, once, since, unless, though. until, when, if, while, whether, until, when, if, while, whether, until, when, if, while, whether, until, when. Oh, baby. So, to spot whether a clause is a main clause or a subordinate clause, you must look at the first word of the clause. The clause will begin with a noun. Oh, that's probably a main clause, like George went to the shops. If the clause begins with a conjunction, one of those 15 words we just talked about, it's probably a subordinate clause. And remember, a clause is the whole sentence. So if we said, and let me choose one, after, although, as the sun was setting, or I might say, what's the subordinate clause, everyone? As the sun was setting. That whole sentence is a subordinate clause. What was the conjunction? As was the conjunction. So, a subordinate clause is a very tricky thing to master because it can actually appear at the start of your sentence before your main clause even begins. So let's choose a subordinate conjunction. Until, when, if, while, you could do while. While the boys chatted, comma, and then my main sentence actually begins. While the boys chatted, comma, the panda was very grumpy, full stop. So, it's really important that we finish our subordinate clauses off with a main clause if we do it in that way there. Some people, when we do this, might say, because George was angry, full stop. And there's no extra information there. Sometimes people might do, because George was angry, full stop. And nothing happened in that sentence. Because George was angry, he cried on the step, full stop. So what's going to happen now is you'll see some sentences in a second. I wonder if you can tell me which of them are main clauses because they make sense completely on their own. They don't need extra information. And which ones are subordinate clauses. They look like main sentences, but they have a conjunction at the start, a subordinating conjunction. There's going to be a few for you to have a look at now. Okay, thank you everybody. I hope you tried your best there. So let's translate again. The word subordinate means less important. Okay, a clause, it's a clause, a word or a sentence. Clause, is it a word or a sentence? A type of sentence, yeah. And a subordinating conjunction, is that a word or a sentence? That's a word usually. There is one due to, we say sometimes, which can be more than one word, working as a conjunction. It's a very tricky thing to do. We use these 5 words, due to the fact that. And that's like the poshest way of saying because. I love you due to the fact that you are so kind and lovely, full stop. But mostly, conjunctions are one word which join together 2 sentences. Why is it called a subordinating conjunction? Is it because the conjunction is less important, or is it because the conjunction is doing something? Tricky one. The conjunction is doing something. It's making the clause less important. Yes, like this. Oh, like I put a spell on you then, I made you less important. So a subordinate clause, because the clause is subordinate, the clause is less important. A subordinating conjunction, because that conjunction is doing a job. It's making something less important. I hope you've learned something today. I hope you've listened to me. Thank you very much indeed, and I hope to see you soon.